I think $4 is still sticker shock for a lot of folks. Although if you're out in California, I think $6 isn't even sticker shock anymore. That's what they're paying in LA. But for most of the country, I think it's, probably somewhere between $4 and $5. It's really a question of how long will the sticker shock stick around because, a couple of weeks, consumers don't really bend or change their driving habits, behaviors, especially in summer when gasoline demand is even more inelastic. You have 3 months of summer driving season. If you're in Chicago, you have a month basically to get out before it starts snowing again. So, to hell, if it's only
lying people about Chicago, that is a lie.
All right, it might be 3 months, it might be 2 months, but the Kennedy's under construction for basically 4.5 seasons out of the year. So,
damn straight. Yeah.
So I do think that there is going to be sticker shock if we get back to $4.50 and $5. But the question is, will it stick around? Is it going to be an entire year? 2024 is set up. Hey, we're only 15 cents a gallon away from hitting $4, and we're in the off peak.
Welcome back to the Future's Edge podcast. I'm Jim Urio, as usual, Bob Iacchino. And as usual, we run an airtight ship here. It's efficient. Yeah. It's quick. There's no nonsense banter. We get right to the meat of things. Today, we have Patrick Haan, who's the CEO of GasBuddy.com. Thank you so much, Patrick. We really appreciate you being here.
Hey, good to be here. If I was CEO, by the way, I'd probably be paying a little bit more. I don't know if I'd have enough time for you. I'm just the lowly head of petroleum analysis, so
I can't give you a promotion.
Boss would love to hear about it, and I'm going to come knocking at HR's door and wonder, hey, where's the bump?
The first thing you should do is take this clip, Patrick, go into his office and go, look, I'm okay with not being CEO. This has to mean something. It's coming from Jimmy Iurio, for God's sake.
That's a hell of a promotion, man, just to start us off.
You're the only one from GasBuddy.com. I know. I follow you on Twitter. I think the site is great. Thank you. Where are you coming to us from?
Live from rainy Chicago today.
Same with me. It was a miserable drive home in the rain. What part?
I am just west of Wrigley Field, about 4 miles. So in the city, not from Schaumburg and not from Iowa. I was actually on vacation once in Mexico.
There you go, Jim.
No suburbs, right?
He's taking a punch at the suburbs. I'm sitting in lovely Palatine right now and happen to like Palatine. So first you've insulted the host, then you've insulted Palatine. You're on a massive roll, Patrick. Thank you.
How's your EV out there? Come on now.
I don't know.
It's actually, so I'm going to chime in here because I was a lifelong Chicagoan, moved to Southwest Florida a little over 3 years ago now. And I lived basically from 2004. Well, when I came back, I moved to Los Angeles in 2004, came back and never left the city again. And for me, it was always the Chicagoland area, which is what most people don't realize. But I will say, if you're from Chicago, you don't say shy. So anyone who's out there and he's like, oh, you coming to the shy? You're not originally from the city. And I actually confirmed that with Bianco. I'll send you a screenshot. Bianco was saying the same thing.
So I have a quick funny thing about that. My daughter had some friends from school over. One of the girls was from Sweden, and they're sitting around, and someone says, oh, she does a perfect Chicago accent. And she goes, to do the Chicago accent, her whole spiel is, hi, I'm from Chicago, not from the suburbs. Not that there's anything wrong with the suburbs or anything. I'm just from Chicago, and that's her Chicago accent spiel.
I get a lot of that down here, Patrick. Like down in Southwest Florida is basically a suburb of Chicago for the most part.
No doubt about it.
Pretty much.
People will be like, oh, you're from Chicago? I'm from Chicago too. Where are you from? I'm like, Chicago. They're like, oh, I'm Lake Zurich. It's something like that. Or I'm
like a whole different country.
Yeah, it's like.
I will not sit here and listen to this disparaging of the Northwest suburbs.
Jim, the suburbs, it's not as bad. I was on vacation in Mexico, and the couple next to us was like, oh, we're from Chicago. We're like, what part? They were like, Iowa. What?
There you go.
Never again. So, at least if, you can be from Palatine, that's fine. At least you're not on vacation telling people you're, whole different state away. And we're like, why do you tell people Chicago? Nobody knows Iowa, apparently.
Jimmy, you might be closer to the Bears than most people from Chicago pretty soon. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, they're going to be walking distance from my place.
Not that anybody wants to be after these first 2 weeks. All right.
Right. Let's go. Patrick, what's up? So this conversation can go so many ways. It's obviously going to be about energy. Crude. I've been a bull on crude for about 6 months. Bobby can verify that. Bobby's been somewhat of a crude bull himself, and he's actually long it. I'm just long the names. When I say the names, like the big integrated oil companies, et cetera, like that, but I can't really talk about them. That's not my licensing. So crude's had a massive run. What do you see for going forward for the next quarter, let's say, demand-wise, et cetera?
Well, first and foremost, interesting that you guys got in when the bull run started. I think, can we blame it on you guys? Everyone wants to point fingers at what the rally is. And I've always said, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and, interesting timing. No, but I mean, it's had an incredible run, right? What were you, early June, and the Saudis decided to wake up on the wrong side of the bed, and $65 is no longer okay. Of course, there's a lot of politics that were intertwined with that. The Biden administration got excited, started filling the SPR up, and then the Saudis put the garbage on that. Demand's been a little bit soft, at least on some of the products I look at. I looked at a lot of refined products, and, we're getting into the time of year that refined products see a little bit of weakness, with the exception being diesel. But, it's been a pretty banner year, and the fundamentals have been strong, especially with this, Saudi-led production cut been extended through the rest of the year. They'd been piecemealing it together right up until August. They've been extending production cuts month by month, and then they took the world by storm by saying, all right, we're just going to go the rest of the year. And oil has seen incredible rally, and it's been interesting watching if it's going to be sustained. There have been days where it's been down, but I think the market is still showing a lot of resilience. And, Citi, I think, came out. They've been kind of a perma bear on oil, so now they're calling for $100. Chevron's calling for $100. I think that's the easiest call to make, is that the run may not be over yet.
I made
especially
it first.
Yeah, there you go. The first call right here. Jim said $100 a barrel, and we're on the cusp.
So it's funny. I actually I got long in July, got out, so it's just like a short-term trade for me. Then I got long August 31st again. So I don't want to take credit for getting long 6 months ago. We definitely started talking about it basing. We started talking about some of the fundamental things, but I didn't actually put my money where my mouth is until really August. And it's interesting because I might end up holding the August trade a little bit longer than the July trade, but not that much longer. So I saw Goldman Sachs call for $107. Now, I don't believe $107 is in the very short term. Now, it's not a show about what I think. It's a show about what you think. So do you think I'm nuts? You on Goldman's team on that, or do you put out targets at all?
I have internal targets. I don't really put them out. I just let the market dictate what my targets are. I don't like to set the market. But I mean, to their point, markets and oil especially hates turmoil, and there's kind of turmoil happening on different levels here, across the globe in different forms. And the oil market doesn't like it. First of all, when you have the Saudis and Russians getting on the same page, that's interesting because OPEC Plus still isn't that old. So the fact that these two are now seeing eye to eye on, production cuts and able to maintain it. I mean, look at the numbers that, when Saudi Arabia came out and said, we're going to cut, everyone's like, well, we'll wait and see. And now the data is starting to back that up. So if anything, if they continue this course, I think they finally, have tuned in the production cuts. They've gotten the verbiage across. The Russians are going along with it. I think the market still could make a run. And the more important critical factor is this is off peak, guys. I mean, consumption is coming out of peak season. If they continue these cuts into 2024, especially as the Fed is navigating the so-called soft landing, and if they start, drawing back the interest rate increases, the economy starts to heat up, and boom, you're going to have an intersection where the global economy needs a lot more oil than's being put out, especially if China decides to reverse course on its no stimulus package. I think there's an incredible argument to be made that 2024 could be a very interesting and strong year for oil prices and commodity prices in general.
So that brings me to the question. You talk about turmoil all over, and that's one of the things that I've been thinking about. Something like a lot of people don't look at these things, but Azerbaijan and Armenia are in a crisis, which may turn into another hot war that isn't going on right now, but they're kind of barbing back and forth. And Azerbaijan is part of the plus of OPEC Plus, right? And their production's already gone down about 60,000 barrels over the last 3 or 4 months. They're only at 604, It was 604, 605,000 last month. Is that enough? I mean, when you look at Saudi Arabia cutting 100,000 barrels and the market gets upset, Russia cutting 100,000 barrels, the market gets upset. It stands to reason militarily that Armenia, if they were going to make any moves in Azerbaijan, would go for that industry, right? Is that something to be concerned with, or is not significant enough to be concerned with it?
I certainly watch everything, in light of the fact that the market is, that supply is probably not even exceeding demand. That's where the market really starts to feel out these fringe cases. I mean, the numbers may not be significant, but when you need every drop or every barrel, the market is going to be more in tune to what's going on there because it's just less breathing room for the rest of the system. And the question is really, will the Saudis and Russians come back and will they adjust? But kind of going back to OPEC quotas, OPEC has been vastly underperforming its own quotas. And keep in mind, the Russians and the Saudis have stolen the show with these huge production cuts. Keep in mind, the rest of OPEC, these production cuts start in 2024. So will OPEC adjust moving forward? I think you're going to see more attention at basically every barrel, especially if the Fed can manage all the interest rate, talk. If the economy does start to rebound more noticeably, I think there is certainly going to be attention on all the numbers across the board, especially from countries that are facing turmoil and geopolitical issues. I think one of the biggest questions, though, is what China does moving forward. In terms of their economy, it's been largely flat, disappointing. Youth unemployment numbers are up. If they have a change in tune here in regards to their economic growth, and if Xi starts to be more interested in economic stimulus, that could really be the straw that breaks the camel's back in 2024 that throws the market completely out of balance. And then absolutely to your point, I think the smaller oil producers are going to be looked at more carefully.
So, Patrick, prior to 2020, prior to 2021, let's say, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seemed like the commonly held belief was that above $4, some demand destruction would creep in. People would start to second guess and try to make other plans as far as driving. That obviously has been blown out of the water. My theory is that it's a little bit of sticker shock on all prices, so it doesn't scare people as much because we're used to higher prices. Is there another line in the sand that's demand destruction? Is it $5.50? Is it $6? Where the hell is it?
I think it's somewhat of a moving target. I think it was only $5. We got to $5 because you had a consumer that had been locked down for 2 years. And to hell with $5, we've been locked down. We haven't been able to enjoy a summer driving season in a while. So I think that's why we got there, is because the consumer was resilient. Look at the broader economy. It was just a locomotive. You couldn't slow it down. And that's why consumers showed a resilience to $5 gasoline. Now, I think the bar is actually going down again now that we're in kind of an economic uncertain time and the economy is slowing down. People aren't feeling as optimistic. If we got hit with $5 a gallon gasoline next summer, it would probably destroy more demand than it did back in 2022. So I think demand destruction, the numbers being pushed down. But I mean, to your point, too, the consumer has seen in many cases the $5 a gallon mark in most, a lot of these states. And so that's not the sticker shock that it was in 2022. But we only got over $5 for what, maybe a week or two at $5.03 a gallon. That's where the national average peaked. So I don't think consumers got stung with those prices long enough for them to be, really have digested that moment. I think $4 is still sticker shock for a lot of folks. Although if you're out in California, I think $6 isn't even sticker shock anymore. That's what they're paying in LA. But for most of the country, I think it's, probably somewhere between $4 and $5. It's really a question of how long will the sticker shock stick around, because a couple of weeks, consumers don't really bend or change their driving habits, behaviors, especially in summer when gasoline demand is even more inelastic. You have 3 months of summer driving season. If you're in Chicago, you have a month basically to get out before it starts snowing again. So, to hell, if it's only
lying people about Chicago, that is a lie.
All right, it might be 3 months, it might be 2 months, but the Kennedy's under construction for basically 4.5 seasons out of the year. So I do think that there is going to be sticker shock if we get back to $4.50 and $5. But the question is, will it stick around? Is it going to be an entire year? I mean, 2024 is set up. I mean, hey, we're only 15 cents a gallon away from hitting $4, and we're in the off peak. If the Saudis, if oil producers suddenly throw the market, some sort of bone and oil prices go up even more, and we get $4 a gallon in the winter, I think that's the demand destruction. Whereas in the summer, demand destruction could need a $5 price to really kick in.
Patrick, we all know that there's a seasonal shift for natural gas. I actually, both these commodities have pretty strong seasonal tailwinds and headwinds depending on where it is. But is there an effect to crude oil if, for example, we had Kenny Polcari on last week and he was talking about the Farmer's Almanac predicting an absolutely brutally cold winter.
Yeah.
Is heating oil enough to move the needle on crude oil prices?
Probably not so much anymore. There's been a lot of initiatives in northeastern United States where a lot of heating oil markets exist to move to retrofit to natural gas or to heat pumps, et cetera. So, heating oil is a bit of a dying product. It certainly won't be dying in the next couple of years, right? This is with the broader transition, except it's not going from a fossil fuel to electric. It's going from a fossil fuel to a cleaner fossil fuel and natural gas. But there's a lot of infrastructure. But if we get a really cold winter, sure, I think there could be some tailwinds from heating oil. Those tailwinds. I mean, a lot of the tailwind for diesel was last year the energy crunch. China didn't have enough, diesel to run its generators. Europe was looking for every fossil fuel it could, but now the situation's a lot different. Europe has looked at gas inventories that are basically, at full capacity going into winter. But Mother Nature, I mean, if we get a really harsh winter, I mean, last year we had a really warm winter. If we get the opposite of that this year, there's really no telling how fast Europe is going to blow through some of those inventories. And keep in mind, a lot of the reason why Europe is now at this place, because a lot of governments last year in the EU are basically begging people not to burn as much, turn the thermostats down. And that's part of the reason why they're better off. Will those behaviors stick around this winter is kind of a big question, too.
So you said something that I want to expound upon a little bit, is that heating oil, which used to be big in the Northeast, is starting to go away. And it's being replaced with natural gas. It's not being replaced with electricity. That's what you said, despite the fact that I imagine the environmental cabal would truly love it to switch to electricity. That's not what we're seeing, right? Well, is that bad to call them a cabal?
No, it's correct.
Yeah. To your point, a lot of that, I mean, in areas where it makes sense, right? Not every area. And keep in mind, this infrastructure is pretty vast and expensive to come across. But yeah, heating oil, look at New York City, right? I mean, everyone's seen the attacks on even natural gas, right? New York City's banning stoves. And a lot of that rhetoric exists in the Northeast, maybe not in the same form, maybe not these rural areas that are banning stoves. But people are trying to get cleaner, and to do so, they're ditching heating oil, which also, by the way, has certainly cleaned up its act, being ultra low sulfur now. Right, no more 500 part per million heating oil. We're down to 15 parts per million and below. So some of these areas you're seeing an accelerated shift to natural gas where it makes sense. Some areas you just aren't, and that's why it's kind of a 50-50 on is it going to be really cold in some of these areas this winter, but some areas have made the switch.
Futures have basically closed higher for the most part now. So we're 15 of the last 18 days in WTI of higher prices. So from a perspective of the shift that I guess my question is, are you ready to go work for Solar Buddy, for Solar Panel Buddy, or whatever it's going to be, electric car buddy? This may not be
kilowatt buddy, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is a question you're even thinking about, but like from a perspective of that shift, California wants to ban the sale of new gas-powered cars in less than 15 years. I think it's 2035, which if you think about it, we're near the end of 20. It's only like 11.
Yeah, it's quick.
It's quick. Ban the sale of them. And from an efficiency standpoint, from a charging station standpoint, I don't know if this is stuff you look at or not, but do you see that as a possibility, or do you see that as just being kind of kicked down the road when the time comes?
I think that's a very loaded question, too, and it depends on the White House, because the White House can really push Americans into EVs. I mean, look at the Biden administration's basically shoving Americans into EVs by, incentives are out there, banning an EPA. There's a lot of executive actions that the president can take to make it be very miserable to own an internal combustion engine vehicle. But I do think the wind could change direction on that. Look at California, right? They're pushing it heavily. And now I don't want this to be the permanent example, right? Because it's not every day that California has grid challenges. It certainly can be a trial and error, and there can be days when power consumption is through the roof. Look at Texas and ERCOT, right? Their grid is a mess. But it has to give you pause when an area that's making it options to electrification left and right, EVs running up and down the road, when they tell you, hey, please don't charge your car today, that's got to give a lot of panic to Americans who have grown accustomed. Our culture is all about mobility. And for the governor in California to say, hey, we appreciate you essentially making the switch to EVs. But by the way, don't drive them for a couple of days because we need the power for our grid. I think the cart's a little bit ahead of the horse here. So I don't know if it's feasible. Look, we're going to have incredible power needs. And look at the stance on nuclear is only recently changing. This kind of delves into how we power plants, right? The majority of them are now natural gas. There's still a couple of relics of coal, but without a huge shift back over to nuclear, I think we are putting the cart ahead of the horse with a lot of these, we're putting a lot of demand on the grid now with EVs in areas that they're making the transition. There's just not enough power in the grid yet. And so I think the pace is going to slow down because we're going to realize, hey, we need more mobile nuclear power plants. We need more broad nuclear power plants to feed our incredible demand for electricity.
So you're suggesting that we have an administration perhaps that's forcing a switch that we're not ready for? How dare you suggest that our leaders aren't doing the right thing?
That's just political on Twitter.
By the way, these transitions, exactly zero of them go off without growing pains, right? I just think that the eyes are on the prize, so to speak. We're not figuring out how to get there. The administration knows, what looks really good politically. They want to get there, but there's no attention to the details. There's no attention to the plan. How many nuclear plants are we going to build to increase our electric, output? Everything's been, let's add all these EVs, which are being powered by natural gas burning power plants, which is the irony of it all.
What worries me all the time is like the rhetoric versus the reality. And if people could actually just look at, you just said it. I mean, this stuff is politics. This is rhetoric. And if you could look past rhetoric and through to reality, I mean, we own a hybrid in my house. We own a Toyota Corolla hybrid. It's great. It's like a video game for us to try and get that average tank mile per gallon higher. Like when we first bought it, it was at 43.4. We've gotten it up to 47.3. And it's funny to me, and I want you to tell me I'm nuts or I'm right on the head here or whatever you think. That's fun to me. That's almost as fun. Like when they take away choice and they say this is going to be mandated, you get a lot of people like myself and like Jim who push back just because we like to fucking push back.
I mean, you got to be devil's advocate, right?
Yeah, I like this hybrid car. We had Doomberg on once. I'm sure you're familiar with Doomberg from Twitter and Substack. And we had him on once, and he literally went through the math as to how the abandoning of hybrid cars is actually going to increase overall carbon because of the affordability of pure electric versus hybrid. More people could afford hybrid. Therefore, there'd be less gas being used in total because of the affordability factor, not just here, but globally, right? So, God, you're not going to answer this question. Is it deliberate or are they just dumb?
Short-sighted, but isn't government infamous for being short-sighted?
Yeah.
Is there a politician who's actually,
They're all knuckleheads.
No, exactly. It's this and this for this agenda and that agenda. And I think to your point, we're American. America is about freedom. And I don't mind. I live on the cusp of Lake Michigan. I obviously would not like if something happened to Lake Michigan, whether it be pollution or, there's obviously been a lot of talk about Enbridge Line 5, right, which is in the Straits of Mackinac. Look, I think it's intrinsic to want to live in an environment that's relatively clean. It really bothers me when I go down the Kennedy and I see all these people throwing their shit out the window. There's trash everywhere. So inherently, I want a clean environment, right? But there's some things that just don't make sense. Having an electric vehicle in the middle of a state that has no infrastructure like Wyoming, right? Are we going to pay billions of dollars to bring in a grid, to bring in fast charging all over the U.S.? Imagine charging a semi out in the middle of I-80 in some of these Western states where the cost to bring infrastructure is incredibly expensive. In those areas, a hybrid approach is probably more feasible. It's more realistic. So I don't like the idea of forcing somebody to do something. What I do like is the idea of government, maybe subsidies is what I'm a favor of. Give people an incentive to do what you want them to do. I'm not against that. I would be against taxes on somebody like you that might drive a Hummer having to pay more to fund those subsidies. I don't know if that's the most fair thing because that can often be a regressive tax. But steer people the way you want them. Don't force it. Let people do what they think is best. Steer the industry that makes cars to be a little cleaner. To your point, give them incentives, to clean up their act. Hybrids are terrific. And by the way, politics, I don't get into it too much. I will say that surprisingly, what was it? The cash for clunkers, the requirement, the CAFE standards.
Yeah.
There was a really interesting shift that happened there that was forced because the Obama administration basically kind of incentivized automakers or kind of pushed them to increase fuel efficiency, right? You have all this exciting technology in cars that's made them really fast, turbochargers, superchargers. There's been a lot of technology that the auto industry was just, kind of building, rinsing, and repeating cars that weren't as fuel efficient. And I think that's where a light touch, some may disagree with me on the light touch of CAFE standards, certainly helped. And I agree with you. Hybrids.
Can you explain what CAFE standards are? I mean, of course,
corporate average fuel economy. And the Obama administration came out and said, look, Ford, you can produce whatever cars you want, but your average fleet, the average models that you produce has to hit, a target of whatever it was. I think it was 50 miles a gallon before it was rescinded down to 36. Yeah. So that inherently forced auto manufacturers to come up with research and technology to meet that standard. But that's what we're referring to.
Okay. And I have no problem with that. I don't know if you saw Kyle Bass's tweet just today about his 2 Teslas that he owns. Did you guys see that? Or no? Because he put out a thing today saying that he owns 2 Teslas. The battery life is not as advertised. The range is not as advertised. He said they're going to pry his combustion engine car out of his cold dead hands. You guys both said government does knuckleheaded things. I think it's beyond that. I think when all the vectors point towards certain areas, it almost becomes there's something nefarious. And again, I don't expect you guys to agree with me on that. That's fine. I'm not sure what the question I have in here is, other than the fact that you agree with us that it's redirecting change with a sledgehammer causes massive problems. You know what I mean? Like this is the problem. You just mentioned those CAFE standards. Gradual change, that's the way it should be addressed, correct?
Before you answer that, if I could, Patrick, I'm just looking at something over here where it said that they were at 33, as you mentioned. They got dropped down from Obama's levels, which were close to 50 to 33. Mm-hmm. And then I've got an article in front of me. This is from April of 2022. Biden-Harris administration announced final CAFE standards, which will improve gas mileage for new passenger vehicles sold in the United States between now and 2026. A new standard requires a 49 mile per gallon fleet-wide average by 2026.
So they're back up there. Well, something I want to touch on with Jim, I think to your point, one problem besets another. When you force EVs all at once, when you force the end goal, it's going to bring on a whole new set of challenges. And I think that's the challenges that we aren't dealing with, right? What I mentioned with nuclear, we're not thinking about how to charge these vehicles. We're just thinking, let's throw them on the road and figure out that problem later. I think the other thing too that might make sense in the years ahead, probably maybe to a lesser degree, is we're talking about how to electrify America, how we're going to come up with these power challenges. The thing about Tesla, the interesting thing, the dynamic, and I have no idea the CO2 impact here, so I can't credibly say one's better than another, is the idea of people putting solar panels on the roofs is really interesting to me. I saw a neighbor do it. I don't like the idea of still having an electric bill, right? The idea is interesting of getting off the grid and having battery power, but inherently that creates pollution as well. And if we're not drilling for oil, we're mining for lithium or whatever the latest and greatest technology is. So there's a lot of issues here. And let's make no mistake, EVs are not pollution free. So are we just trading one problem for another and a whole another can of worms? I think this is kind of outside the topic, but I think the best way, to your point, is a slow transition and giving people options. Let people buy Teslas, absolutely. Maybe even give them incentives. Try to give them incentives away from vehicles from 1970 that basically roll coal permanently, right? Those old semi trucks, we should get those off the road and give people an incentive to do so. But it's not like you're going to take somebody's 1925 Ford away from them because it doesn't meet today's air pollution, right? And I think that's the problem, is let people have their old antiques, but give people incentive to get out of them where it makes sense.
This is one of the massive problems you just mentioned. I don't know if you know about these ULEZ cameras in the UK about certain cars based on the plates, that emissions, and you get fined if you go a certain distance. These are particularly affect poor people, which, by the way, the whole Blade Runner thing where they've cut down 2,600 of those cameras. I don't know if you guys are up on this story. It's absolutely fabulous. Bobby, Patrick mentioned something about the environmental impact of EVs. You
Yep.
probably are completely up to speed on this. I'd heard you have to drive the car 60 to 70,000 miles before it even starts to have an environmental impact. Is that the right math?
I'm more about the cost of the consumer math. A big part of building EVs is building them at this point is puts out more than it saves. However, Elon Musk specifically, and a lot of big companies as well, like Ford just got I think it was 4 trillion, billion, zillion in loans to do all electric cars. A lot of that has to do with curbing some of the emissions of building the cars in the first place. But I looked about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and even with the highest level tax credits, it takes about 6 years to get down to the price of the ICE, of the internal combustion comparable, right? And the best value was the hybrid when I did that math. So literally you have to drive an electric car for 6 years to get the price to even. Prices from a year and a half ago, which admittedly have come down. And I think, to Patrick's point about choice, right? The genius of Elon Musk, and I think he's crazy, and I think he's done some things that have been bordered on criminal with the SEC. But the genius of Elon Musk is when he released Tesla, he released it as a roadster for $100,000, which got
Perfect.
a bunch of environmental elites who have the money to buy this car, to be able to go out and say, I have a badge I can be proud of. I go 0 to 60 in like negative seconds. I actually go back in time. And I'm also green, right? And that's why, Prius was arguably successful, but nowhere near the early success of Tesla. I think you both agree. Please disagree if you don't. And then you slowly build down lower level cars, right? And most automakers do the opposite. When Honda came to the US, they had that crappy brown Civic. I don't know if, Patrick, you're old enough to remember that. I know Jim is. They had the crappy brown Civic. And then they started building up all the way to Acura. And Acura is still not looked at as good as Mercedes or Audi or BMW, whereas Tesla is.
They started with the right business model, right? How many startups start with the monetize it down the road?
You wouldn't be talking about Kyle Bass having 2 plug-in Corollas at any point in time. So to me, that's the genius of Patrick's statement about choice. If you actually go, look, this is good for the environment, you can also still be like a rich elitist if you want to be, and you can do this. And now all of a sudden, the whole electric car market has become cool because of the way our culture works. Am I nuts in thinking that?
I don't think so. And by the way, I was just looking at the Roadster the other day because if nothing else, what's undeniable is how much fun and how much of a vehicle enthusiast. I mean, those EVs are nuts. They're like go-karts on steroids. 0 to 60 in 1.6 seconds. That's the crazy thing about electric motors, and that's fascinating is just a vehicle enthusiast is I actually did take a Tesla test drive out for the other day, and it was just a completely different experience being in a vehicle like that. It was like piloting the space shuttle for the first time. It's like, where the hell are all the controls? It's a different experience, and I'm not going to put somebody down because their lifestyle is better. But the interesting thing is I think people should have the opportunity, right? There are still real present issues with EVs. I was looking at taking one for potentially down to Florida because I also do the Chicago migration down to the South in the winter. And there's a lot of open-ended questions that I do have to worry about. What happens if you run out of juice? What happens? All this technology is new. And to your point about internal combustion engine vehicles, everyone knows them. My entire life, I've driven internal combustion engine vehicles. I know how to respond if something happens. I can generally do low-level repairs. What the hell's going to happen if one of my Tesla motors dies? I don't even know what to do with the thing. So I think that's the point is let people ease into something new, maybe give them a subsidy, maybe encourage them to do so. But I think where this wraps up, kind of in oil too, is I had a lot of questions on this is, are EVs stifling oil consumption? I think not so much. You look at China, which is probably, I don't know, would we agree? China's moved into a second or first, they're moving into a second or first world country at this point because of all the manufacturing happening there. And they're starting to want this piece of American culture, which is driving. And arguably, I think their fleet conversion, their transition to EVs is probably happening at an accelerated pace because their economy has been behind us, but is now catching up a bit. They're still all about choice as well. But it'll be interesting to see how quickly it does hit oil consumption. I don't think it's really having much of an effect, but you have to believe that if we were all still running around with internal combustion engine vehicles, that gasoline demand would probably be reaching record levels.
Okay, so I want to expound on that a tiny bit too, about whether or not EVs eating into gas consumption or oil consumption, and I want to bring it back to markets and the macroeconomic condition. So, I assume that you look at demand of gasoline day to day. Do you believe that that is a glimpse into when the recession's coming, if the recession's coming? What have you seen over the last even couple weeks? Is gas demand still, if you take out the seasonalities, is gas demand still staying consistent?
I think I think what we've been seeing is an accelerated downturn. So excluding seasonality, right? Everyone knows gasoline demand goes down in the fall. I've been looking at the numbers this year and last year, and the downturn has been a little bit more noticeable this year. It's also felt more noticeable. It's been rather abrupt. Typically, as we get into the fall, you start to see some foliage demand hitting, right? Americans like to get out. We're not seeing that as much. I don't know if that's because everyone and their brother hit the road last year when prices were really high and they don't feel the need to go see it again a year later. But it does feel like gasoline demand is falling a little bit more than it does seasonally. I don't know if that's necessarily related to the economy, right? There's so many different COVID imbalances that, we talk about Americans hit the road last year. Work from home is still a thing. It's hard to parse out all the noise behind why it may be a little bit lower. Is it weather? All of these things.
So I think what we're all three saying is that the COVID mitigation, the lockdown, it's thrown everything a complete curveball. It almost seems like people don't give a shit about going broke, about spending money they don't have. Everybody has this sort of YOLO thing going on. Is that kind of what you're saying too? People willing to spend themselves into the grave right now?
I think so. I think now that's toning down a bit. I think, yes, last year, right? People were just throwing money left and right. It was less about buying stuff, right? All the retail stocks, stores like Target and Walmart are like, we have all this inventory because people just up and went. They shifted from buying stuff during the pandemic, and now they're all about experiencing getting out. I think that is toning down. I think some of the consumer behavior trends are going back to maybe more close to norms, right? People got out when it was really expensive. And I think that's why we're also seeing a bit of a shift in our data, is because there is an economic slowdown. People are a little bit more cautious, maybe pessimistic about getting out and driving. And so I think that's part of the reason why we are seeing gasoline demand a little bit weaker this year than last year, because the attitude in the consumer is shifting.
So let me shift from this and let me know if you have an opinion on this or not. We had Art Hogan on, and Art Hogan made a point of saying that gasoline and energy in general, averaged out over the year, only ends up to be about somewhere in the range of 3 to 6% of a consumer's spend. How much of $100 oil do you think could slow a consumer? And we're looking at, I just pulled up credit card delinquencies from the St. Louis Fed, and we have now finally passed pre-pandemic levels. Delinquencies are up now past pre-pandemic levels by the tiniest amount. We also know the savings rate has been dropping. I maintain that it's more psychological than anything. When gas prices start going up, people just kind of clam up a little bit because they're worried, because they know they have to go to work. They know they have to drive their kid to soccer, and they have to go to grocery stores and anything. Do you have an opinion on how much it actually affects inflation in a real way?
Well, I mean, and to your point, it's all psychological, because how many gas stations are you driving by in your commute to drop your kids off or to the grocery store, right? And that's kind of the barometer for the economy. By the way, to your mention about consumer debt and whatnot, the average consumer this year is probably going to spend in the ballpark of about $2,300 on gasoline. The average consumer salary is about $59,000. So if I quick do the arithmetic, we're kind of right on par with what you said. Consumers hate gas prices. They're always going to hate them, right? Because they're always going to be too high. But there's a difference between the underlying anger and the psychology behind what's too expensive. And I still think that given the economic activity right now, consumers they're resisting these higher prices. Yeah, sure, they still have to fill up. They still have to go to school and work and whatever else. But I think they're letting it affect, right? The psyche is that they're downbeat on the economy. Because again, I think a lot of politicians also, I think the Biden administration is very aware that high gas prices really hit psyche, and they really hit votes too. But right now, I'm saying American consumers are reacting out of frustration, that gas prices are high, and they're faced with those high prices every day.
I want to put something to bed, because I smiled when you said people are always complaining about gas prices, because that seems to be at least 25, 30% of what you have to do on Twitter, where you have to explain to people, yes, they're high, but they're only 11 cents higher than this time last year, or whatever it is. Can you either validate or put to rest how all these mean, crazy gas stations price gouge and never bring prices back down for when oil prices go down? Please explain 3-2-1 on a barrel of oil, or however you want to do it.
I mean, gas stations are just middlemen taking a commodity and reselling it based on their cost. And the underlying commodity is what's fluctuating, and it's fluctuating because a lot of external factors. Right now it's still Russia and Saudi Arabia, it's refinery issues, right? For the one thing that we talk about COVID, and I don't think Americans are going to understand this a lot, is that COVID just decimated the normal markets, and they caused some refineries to permanently shut down, right? COVID shut down single-handedly 1 million barrels a day of refining capacity, over 5%. Other things like refinery fires, and this is where politics plays into it too, because what oil company that's being targeted by administration is going to say, hey, let's invest $1 billion in a refinery that is going to be targeted left and right for, the environmental outcomes? That's a lot of the story, is that COVID imbalances have permanently altered the market, right? My last couple of weeks has been all about refinery this and that, and Americans don't understand the vital factor that refineries fulfill. Without a refinery, you could have $1 a barrel oil, and you could have gasoline theoretically at $10 a gallon. If there's no one to take that oil and to refine it, you can have all the oil in the world, but no gasoline. And that's so much of my job is refinery outages, and people just don't understand that without refineries, there's no gasoline.
So Jimmy owns a restaurant in Palatine called Brant's of Palatine, which the next time you get on a train and take a ride out to the suburbs.
We don't have steak anymore.
Am I right in saying the refinery is like Jimmy's Grills? I mean, he can't bring in triple the beef that he can cook and sell, right? I mean, if he's got this many grills and this many cooks, that's all he can do. And that's as fast as he can pump them out. We don't have the refinery capacity to overrun our gas stations with gas.
Can I add to that Bobby's question real quick too? The Chevron CEO last year came out and said there will never be another refinery built in this country again due to regulatory things. So you can respond to Bobby's question. Is this about regulation? Is that we just have to change our tune or no?
Well, I mean, a lot of it's been about a regulation. NIMBYs, right? Nobody wants a refinery in their backyard anymore. So now where are you going to put it? How many years are you going to spend cutting red tape? I mean, look at the Keystone Pipeline. How many years they cut through red tape, and they didn't even, billions of dollars just lost because President Biden shut it down. Now, arguably, they probably knew it was going to be a battle from the get-go. And that's why you haven't seen a new large-scale refinery built since the 70s, but a lot of existing refineries have expanded. But no expansion. I mean, the refinery builds are not happening in the U.S. That doesn't mean they're not happening elsewhere. It's just that our regulatory environment and our evolution to EVs and other, forms of energy means that it's not conducive to build here in the U.S. Now, having said that, the U.S., nobody can do it cheaper. Natural gas is cheap. We're an energy powerhouse. I mean, Texas, ExxonMobil's refinery in Beaumont just finished basically adding a new refinery, 275,000 barrels a day. But a lot of these new projects are not going to be coming online in the United States. In fact, we probably are done with large-scale refinery expansions. We're probably done building refineries. They're going to come online overseas. And, the headline there should be, look at the psyche behind foreign oil, right? Politicians have lined up against foreign oil, against foreign reliance. And so suddenly the gap that's going to develop is we're going to become more reliant on refined product, jet fuel, diesel, that's going to be imported from countries that are building refineries, the Middle East, Africa, China.
I know.
We don't see eye to eye with China, and so that's going to be politically fraught as well.
The energy policy baffles me. A year ago, I wrote a little thing and I released it on Twitter, what I thought for high gas prices might help. I said if we passed a law that banned ladders like over 10 or 15 feet, then the kid couldn't come out and change the numbers on the sign. Yes, it's just math. This is a viable theory, correct?
Yeah, you swap out ladders for LED signs, and now they can change prices.
Oh shit, we got to do something about that.
Darn! Again, now look what you did.
Like what you said before, there are no solutions; there are only trade-offs. Bobby.
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite lines by Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell, just people need to read more of him. Anyway, my honestly, my last technical question for you is: we're the largest producer in the world right now of crude oil, right? And we're doing that with about 44% less rigs. More efficient, problem for the future. How do you see that? I mean, last time we had this much production, we were some in the range of 1,200 to 1,300 rigs, and now we're in the 500s.
Yeah, a little bit of caution. The Permian's been vital. The key source of much of our U.S. domestic success drilling has been the Permian Basin. And now the Department of Energy, the EIA, has Permian output starting to slowly decline over the next couple of months. We'll have to see. Rigs have popped up suddenly when $90 oil hit. We have seen rigs go up a couple of weeks. It's far too early to say the coast is clear and we're back to boom. But that's going to be something to watch. I mean, the Permian is vital to our energy security. And if you see rigs, if you see investments start to decline, I mean, I've been one that said, look, the leases that Biden's has canceled have been irrelevant, but we're going to need more land to drill on in areas of the Permian, and we're going to have to see what the administration's stance is on that. Because if we do start to see a decline there, it's going to inevitably lead to a decline in U.S. oil production that could be a year or several years away from happening. So
something a lot of people don't know is shale oil rigs, the bulk of their production comes at the beginning of the life when you compare it to the old classic rigs that were kind of just pumping in a more consistent fashion. The shale rigs, I don't remember the number, so I'm not even going to quote it, but just imagine that I'm right on this. It's somewhere in the range of like 50% of their life comes out at the very beginning, like the first third of their life. And then the rest just kind of trickles out. So if we don't get CapEx and leases, there's going to be trouble.
Yeah. And I mean, to your point, a lot of Americans, the political talking point was, oil companies have been sitting on leases. Well, this is why, because not every time you drill in the ground, are you going to find something. And when you do, you might move through it relatively quickly. You might have a great start. And then very quickly you start to see, a well declining. So again, this is why you need an inventory of leases, of permits to continue exploration, because if you don't, well, eventually the decline is going to hit.
So this will be my last question, Bobby, if you have anything after that. But when people come at me and say, well, if our energy policy is so bad, why are we pumping a similar, slightly more amount of oil than we were just prior to the pandemic, which I believe that's the case right now. How do I respond to that and still underscore the fact that our policy is bipolar?
It takes years to build the infrastructure, to get it to market, to explore, to get that oil again to market. Is a long time. And so policies that are happening today will absolutely impact us. I think where most Americans are wrong is thinking that Biden's policies are impacting the price increases that are happening today. That's happening because of factors, Russia, Saudi Arabia, all that. But it will eventually hit us. It'll take a few years for us to cycle through those leases. And then if there's an inventory of declining leases that aren't, it's going to be trouble down the road. It absolutely is. There's no denying it. But again, from my chair, a lot of people believe that is the reason prices are going up today. It's not. But that is a huge problem. And if we don't fix it, if we don't have energy policy that's conducive to expanding or continuing to grow, that's where the problem is going to be. And that's where we are now, is these problems, not building the Keystone, canceling permits. It's not a problem for today, tomorrow, or next year. That's a problem for 3 to 5 years down the line, when that growth and the lack of it because of these policies isn't going to be there.
You answered every question I have. Oil companies are evil. We all in agreement. They're just evil.
Yeah, right.
Those price gougers. I mean, come on now, guys. Gas is expensive in California, but not in Texas.
And nobody, I go to the words of Kevin Ferry, Jim, who used to be on the trading floor with us. He goes, everybody hates us when we drive the price down, but they don't complain when we drive it up. He was talking about equities at the time. So the reverse for crude oil. Nobody weeps for the crude oil companies when you had negative crude oil, or you
damn straight
$6 a barrel. I got to go to the Van Gogh exhibit in Miami and glue myself to a painting. So I'm done for that.
An oil-based painting, right?
An oil-based painting.
Yes. Patrick, thank you so much. It was really, really nice meeting you, and I'm so glad you came. There was a lot of really eye-opening stuff. Greatly
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Take care, Patrick.
Yeah.